The Lag BaOmer parade that I remember the clearest, for obvious reasons, is the one of Tafshin Nun. Although I did participate from the other end of the world. And the way it was back then for the younger Bachrim who might be living right now in the Ilam Chodosh. So in order to participate in the parade, in order to be able to see the parade, so the parade was telecast, and I hope my memory is right, but this is what I remember, is first of all, this was for sure, is in order to be able to watch the parade, we had to travel from the eastern suburbs, from Bondi to the North Shore, just over the bridge, and come to a Channel 7, Channel 9, one of the stations. And I believe that the studio time officially was $600 a minute, which sounds like a mishuggah amount of money, but if a phone call, just an international phone call, then cost, what, $3-4 or something back then, so I don't know. $600 is probably not that much off. But it was a lot of money. And we were actually, in Sydney, we were lucky because all we had to pay was studio time. Why? Because the actual telecast was paid for over here, apparently by Yossel, because it was being beamed to Melbourne, but the technology was such that whatever goes to Melbourne first has to come through Sydney. I don't know why or what, but this is the way it was. So it was anyways coming through Sydney. So all there was, we had to pay for studio time. And the Anashu Sydney, probably with the help of Anashu Melbourne, put together enough time to be able to watch 1 hour. 1 hour. So remember getting up, Father waking us all up, and it's already more surreal because, in the middle of the night, you get out of bed and you get into the car and you travel 45 minutes and you come. And we watched the parade for an hour, and I remember towards the end, everyone there wanted to see longer. Someone's scavenging together another minute, but I don't know, they put together another 3, 4, 5 minutes, but, that was it. And obviously the next step was to wait for the video to be sent over as soon as possible, which will take place a couple of weeks to be able to watch the video. But one of the things which we were aware of at the time is that it was forecast that Sunday, Lag BaOmer, was forecast, it was supposed to be completely rained out. It's always amazing to go to New York, that Talucha days and Lag BaOmer parades and everything, the weather forecast is always rain, but Labor Day is always beautiful weather, right? Anyway, it's supposed to be rain, and so they wrote into the Rebbe asking for a bracha that it shouldn't rain, it shouldn't ruin the parade. And just a couple of minutes before the parade, the clouds went away, and there was no rain. And Amamish, you can hear it on the video. At one point in the video, the what are they called? The commentators, or whatever this is, the MCs, Rabbi Shmuel, Kaplan, as well as whoever the other one was, they're talking about this thing, that the weather is just beautiful, and who would have believed this morning that the weather would be beautiful? And apparently all around Brooklyn, everywhere else, it was still raining. The parade was supposed to end at 2 o'clock. And, the Lubavitch time, 2 o'clock, it wasn't over, and the Rebbe was still outside watching the last of the children were coming past, and it started to drizzle. So this part I heard from my brother who was there at the time, funny, and he said that Rabbi Shon Baumgartner, Tzivas Hashem, he came running up to J.J. Hecht, and he said, told the Rebbe it's raining, as a brother. And J.J. didn't realize that his microphone was on, and he said, the Rebbe knows, he's standing in it. Told the Rebbe it's raining. But rain, like BaOmer, of course, reminds us of what Chassidus speaks about, the famous Maisa that you have with Rav Shimon Bar Yochai. One of those times that the world needed rain. And so what happened is the Talmidim said, we have to go, and we have to ask Rashbi for rain. So you did sort of see this, where the Talmidim had to go and tell their Rebbe, hey, there's no rain. And Rashbi, when he heard this, he said, a Torah on the pasuk of Hinei Matzah V'Mayanot Shavasachim Tam Yochad, and it began to rain. And there's a Maimar, I think it's Tavshim and Beis, where the Rebbe discusses Meire Dikafin. The fact that Rashbi brought rain is not a chiddush, because there's many stories. You learn Perek Gimel of Tainis, and there's story after story after story, how so many of the Tanoim had the koyach to bring rain. However, the Rebbe says we see two chilukim. One chiluk is that by the other Tanoim, many times when the rain came, it came begrudgingly. It didn't come straight away strongly. The Chmaisa Chen Yamagil had to negotiate back and forth until he got the proper rain. Whereas when Rashbi wanted rain, it came out the way it needed to be. But the main chiluk the Rebbe says is you don't have anywhere else incident, a situation where Tana, when he was asked to bring rain, that he sat down and he said Torah. By everyone, they sat down or they stood up and they were mispalel. They davened. They davened. They didn't sit down and learn Torah. However, by Reb Shimon bar Yochai sat down and he said this Torah. And the Rebbe says, Chassidus explains that no other Tana had that Yecholos, had the ability to do so. And in that Maimer, the Rebbe says that if, or wasn't that Maimer, but in another Sikha, the Rebbe says that who could say such a thing? If Chassidus did not say such a thing, how could we say such a thing? That no other Tana had the Yecholos to do this. But if Chassidus says this, then this is the way it is. This is the way it is. They only had the koach through Tefillah, and yet Rabbi had the power through Torah. And we all understand it because the reason, how do you bring brachas down to the world, how you mishanas, you all know from Tanya, etc., is dafka through Tefillah. Josh mentioned to me before that tonight is the Yortzeit of Shlomo Chaim. So when he said that, and so we talk about Torah and Tefillah, so one of the stories that I heard from time to time from my father is that when one of the things that Shlomo Chaim said, that he heard Reb Shlomo Chaim say, is Reb Shlomo Chaim says that we have a very simple proof, is Manazeh, that the Alter Rebbe in Tanya is right. What's shot? The Alter Rebbe says in Tanya that the main avodah these days is avodah hatefillah and not the Murat Torah. And said Reb Shlomo Chaim, we have proof. Why? Because it only makes sense that the thing which is our tachlis, there should be no other thing in the world should be able to do that. Because if that's our tachlis, then that's our tachlis. It's not something that anything else should be able to do. He said, Limud Torah, computers can learn Torah much better than us. You do Torah, they know much more. You want to find something, you punch it in, and there you go. Right? This was even before Google. Straight away, Limud Torah, the computer's already doing better than us. But Avodas HaTefillah, he said they'll never create a computer that had Avodas HaTefillah. I'm sure it will remain that way. No such a thing. However, Reb Shimon bar Yochai, he was able to bring it out through Torah. And the reason the Rebbe explains is, again, this idea, which we've been speaking about, is that since Reb Shimon bar Yochai was on such a madrega, was on a level which is higher than Ishtalshus, he was be able to poil, to bring down Pashut, affect the world in exactly the way the world needed, through the union of Torah. However, the Rebbe goes on to continue, and I think this has a very important message for us, an important lesson for us. And the Rebbe goes on to say, one of the questions that you have in that whole incident is it says that the Talmidim were Meshabeach. First of all, they came to Rashbi. They were Meshabeach the Rashbi. What's going on? That they had to come to the Rashbi, that they had to be Meshabeach. Like, JJ was right. When it's raining, you don't have to go tell the Rebbe it's raining. He's standing in the rain, right? So by Rashbi, what's Pshat? You have to go to Rashbi and tell him it's raining. We need rain. And the Rebbe says that we all know, according to Chassidus, what explains that when you have a halas man, when the Makabel comes along, in order to receive a hashpah, this causes an ilui in the mashpia itself. This brings that the very fact you have a halas man, that the Makabel is coming to ask for hashpah, so this already raises the mashpia to a much higher level. And without the Talmidim, the Rebbe actually has more than one view, but according to his explanation, without the Talmidim coming, Taka would not have happened. By the Talmidim coming and asking and being miskasher with Reb Shimon bar Yochai and being meshabech him and asking him to bring the rain, this brought Rashbi to a higher level where he was able to bring the rain. No, so maybe we could borrow on what the Rebbe said, that if such a thing we can say, but the only reason we could say it is because Chassidus says it. What does it say in this Maimer? Black and white, what it's saying in this Maimer is because the Talmidim came, and because the Talmidim came and connected with their Rebbe, with the Nasi in that generation, with Rashbi, that's why something happened which otherwise would not have happened. It would not have happened without that. That's what the Maimer says. Without these Talmidim coming and asking, saying, we need the rain, and please arrange the rain for us, and be Meshabeach Rashbi, it just wouldn't have happened. And there's a beer in that, and that is when the Talmidim, when the Mushba'im, when the Mekablim come along and ask for that, this causes that it should become possible. So how we understand it, whether we understand it, v'chulu, that's irrelevant. But the fact is, this is the Metzias. So of course, there's a very strong message and a very powerful message for us that we have to think about what we achieve through his kashrus. We normally walk around thinking, and we're right to a certain degree, that his kashrus is really for us. His kashrus is for us. I mean, you learn in Kuntrus, Shtachlis, and many other Mamorim where it speaks about the whole point of the whole idea of his, the Rebbe is anyways connected with you. And the hadgasha, the emphasis that we have to have iskashus, which is why we have to have iskashus. You're already connected. What does it mean you have to have iskashus? That means you have to work on making sure that you feel the iskashus. The iskashus is them. It's not the Rebbe, it's there. You have that relationship. But the problem is that you're just distracted. You're focused on other things. And therefore, you have to work on your iskashus. That's usually the biur. Right? And that's obviously correct. But over here we see a much deeper thing, or another thing entirely, and that is, obviously without negating the first thing we just said, but this idea that when the hiskashrus is actually piles something that would just be completely impossible without it. So, talking like Goimer, what the Rebbe stood for, the Rebbe was Noisa Hafchim, the Rebbe always you see this idea, always opposites. So we have to excel in Torah, we have to excel in Avodah, we have to excel on the Hafatz Hamayonas Chutzah, but then also on the chutzah within us. And so we have to be involved in Yonim of Limud HaTorah, Torah Asim and Asur, we have to be involved in Sarchei Tzibur. Everything has to somehow happen, and it will happen. And the Rebbe was nice to Hafkim, but the Rebbe demanded that from us. So we also have to do the same. We have to be able to do all these opposite things. And the way we do these opposite things is by being Mekusha with the Rebbe, working on our iskashus, then we're able to achieve that the Yonim the Rashbi can do, we should be able to do as well. L'chaim, l'chaim.
David, so Weiße.
Stop doing this.
L'chaim, Benyon.
Gesund stark.
Mein YouTube.
Bist du Herr König? Gib Waffels.
Soll sein gesund und stark.
Nee, mit Per Wolle.
You want a broch, man? You want a birchis kehanim?
I remember in Miami, again with Shmuel, we go back 40 years ago. Every shop was open till 1 o'clock, 12 to 1. Because otherwise, shops are people don't want to buy lots of them. Come, before they do, 1 o'clock they can go. The family was meal, otherwise they won't come. They could leave anyway. That's the matter how it goes. Although, like you said, we're being trained. There's no covering for the I went to the bucket white zero cooking. Like he was on the bucket. And he heard the ready to make this is 6 hours. 6 hours without food?
So we talked about rain before. So Rabbi Yomin said the guaranteed way to bring rain is to start building a sukkah, and you get your rain. So the Maisa told about the Tzemach Tzedek that a while after he was Mekabel the Nesiyas, so some Chassidim had the ha'azah to lodge a complaint. And what was the complaint? To compare the way the Seder was by the Tzemach Tzedek to the way it was by the Alter Rebbe. And what was their complaint? Their complaint was that by the Alter Rebbe, whenever, let's say when it came to Yechidus, and you had to put the Chassidim in an order, who's going to go first and who's going to go second. So who always got the biggest priority? The Malamdim. The teachers come first. And the Gvirim, they might be Gvirim, but they're Balei Esek, not Balei Torah. So they go second. And the question, the time that they had is by the Tzemach Tzedek. It's the other way around, that all the Gvirim push their way first. The Ashirim push their way first. The people who give, who have financial sway, they come first. And the Malamdim come last. So they asked the Tzemach Tzedek, what's going on? So Tzemach Tzedek responded, so what do you want me to do? So they said, simple. What do you mean, what are you supposed to do? You should put out an instruction. The Malamdim and the Balei Torah have to come first, and the Balei Esek come last. So the Tzemach Tzedek says, I want to tell you a story. The story is that in one of the Mediterranean towns, somewhere in Eretz Yisrael, there was a Meshech Zman. There was a long period of time there was no rain. And if this goes on and on and on, it gets to a point where it's Pashut. Higia Mayim Ad Nofesh, but there's no Mayim, right? But it's the matzah's bad. And so the local Rav said that we have to make a tainus. And they made a tainus. Now, over there near the city, there was a very simple farmer. And this farmer, he was very sincere, but he didn't know anything. So the way it used to work is he would come into the city from time to time to sell his wares, to sell his produce. But when he would come to the city, he'd also come to the Rav in order to get the itinerary for the next while, to know what's coming up, which Yom Tovim are coming up, which Kanesim are coming up, etc. And this way he knows what to expect. Anyways, he comes to town, and he came to town with everything that he wants to sell, and he sees that the whole market is empty, the Yidden are not there. And finally he was able to find the Yidden, and he says, where's everyone? He says, what do you mean, where's everyone? Everyone's in shul. He said, why is everyone in shul? What's special about today? So he said, today is a tainus. So when this Yid heard this, he was he was shattered, he was shocked. There's a tinus and he didn't know about it. So he ran to the shul and he was all upset. And he found a moment with the rabbi, with the Rav, and he says, I'm coming to complain because last time we met and you didn't tell me about this tinus. So the Rav started to explain, don't worry, you have nothing to worry about, you did nothing wrong, this isn't one of the set tanesim, it's not one of the set fasts. Elomai, we don't have rain. And that's why there's a fast. Now this Jew is not comprehending, and he says to the Rav, there's no rain. Okay, but why is that a fast? Like, fast, no rain, what's the connection? So the Rav says, very simple, the connection is there's no rain, there's nothing we can do about it. And if there's no rain, there's nothing we can do about it, so we make a tinus, and we do tshuva, and we daven, and we ask for the Rebbeinu Shalom to send rain. So this simple peasant farmer responds, why on earth would you do such a complicated thing just to bring rain? So the Rav says, really? He was now very intrigued and very curious, and he says, do you have a better idea? You have some other suggestion? He says, I can think of such an easy suggestion. So the Rav says, let me hear the suggestion. So he says, very simple, I've noticed something interesting. Whenever it rains, I realize that my cat, a couple of hours before it starts to rain, it immediately runs in from who knows where, and it comes and it sits and cowers next to the stove in the corner. And after a while, I realize the pattern. It sense that always it comes there, and then it begins to rain. And you know, sometimes it comes and it sits on top of the stove, and then the rain is like unbelievable, because the rain comes very much. So now it's the Rav's turn, he's not comprehending, and he says, and therefore, like, what are you saying? So the farmer says, very simple. If you need rain, I can just go home, I'll find the cat, I'll pick up the cat, and I'll put him on the stove, and it's going to rain. You see, it's going to rain. So that was a story that Tzemach Tzedek said to the Chassidim, and the Chassidim understood the point of the Tzemach Tzedek. The Tzemach Tzedek was saying, of course, he could go and make a takana, but the Melamdim have to come before the Bali Asek. He could make such a takana. But is that really going to change anything? Is that all of a sudden going to mean that this is a pnimizdika thing, that this is a real thing, that this is something which is the Chassidim Takin feel that way? In the times of the Alter Rebbe, it wasn't that way because the Alter Rebbe instituted it and the Alter Rebbe demanded it, but it was that way because it's the way Mamish needed to be. And in the times of the Tzemach Tzedek, the point of the Tzemach Tzedek was if they don't have that hakara, they don't have that hagosha, so what do you want from me? So we see from this that obviously the expectation in Chabad is not that we be Chassidim in the sense that we're told what to do, that we do everything because we're told what to do. Of course, it's Kabbalah Sol, but Kabbalah Sol doesn't mean that I'm not going to do anything unless I'm told what to do. When I'm told to do it, I'm going to do it because I was told to do, but the end is completely different. Obviously, the point is to build up the proper hergesh and to build up the proper hashkafas and to build up the proper hanachas, to build up the proper approaches and the proper ways of looking at things, and the things that we do need to be in a pnimizdika way. L'chaim, l'chaim. Ay 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 Fine. One of the mices which the Rebbe would bring about Reb Shimon Bar Yochai is a mice about one of the Talmidim of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. Okay. So Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, one of his Talmidim closed the Svarim, and he left and he went overseas, and he made a lot of money. And he returned to town and he flaunted his wealth. He showed everyone the ashiras he had acquired. And the vibe that this created is some of the other Talmidim felt that they were perhaps missing a little bit out. And so when Rabbi sensed this, Rabbi took all the Talmidim and he took them to a bikah, took them into a lowland, into a valley. And he filled it up instantly with gold coins. And he told them that everyone over here is mezuman to take whatever it is that they want. But it's come with a cheshbon. In other words, you can take what you want down here, but it's going to come off the cheshbon upstairs. And obviously with a instruction like that, they didn't take anything. It's a famous Maisa, but there's somewhat of a similar story, which the Rebbe discussed about connected to this week's Pasha, Pasha's Bahar, about Rabbi Yehuda, another one of the Tanoim, Rabbi Yehuda ben Eloi. And I hope I'm getting the details right because I didn't see the Sikha recently, so I didn't see the Maisa either. I wasn't planning on giving this over. But from memory, the Gemara discusses the abject poverty that Rabbi Yehuda lived in. It was ad kadei kach that Rabbi Yehuda and his wife had a garment, which was a type of cloak, a type of garment that either a man or a woman could wear, and it was an outer garment. And when you go out for Rosh Hashanah, you need to have an outer garment. So both of them would use it, and that meant that you couldn't have both out of the house at the same time. So one time the Chacham needed him from memory. The mice that they needed, there was a mice with rain again. No, there was and they wanted Rabbi Yehuda Bar Eloi to come. And the Rabbi Yehuda stuck that he came, Rabbi Yehuda stuck at home. And so when the people came to visit, Rabbi Yehuda sensed that he could tell in them that they were wondering about the abject poverty. So Rabbi Yehuda sort of lifted up the rug, and beneath the rug, whoever came to visit him was able to see lots of gold coins. Obviously through a nest. He wasn't keeping that away from the IRS, from the ATO, but it was just in the moment. He showed them that. And the Rebbe brings the story, the Kaplan, to something in this week's Parsha. In this week's Parsha it says, Ukrosem dror, I don't think it's a Mugad de Kesicha, Ukrosem dror, Pa'aras Echol Yeshveha. And what is dror? In other words, we're calling freedom, that everyone is free. Everyone can go free. All the avodim can go free. And what does Rashi say over there? He brings in the name of Rabbi Yehuda that what is dror? Dror is k'medayer. It's connected to Lashon dira. Dira means a dwelling, and that this that we say that there's freedom. The dror is the fact that now this Eved can go free and he can make a dira. And the Rebbe asks in the Sikha a very, very simple question. And the Rebbe says that's all that freedom, that's the only way that freedom can be expressed. We understand that when he was an Eved, he couldn't, if you're an Eved, you don't have your own home. You're living in the home of your balabas. But there's so many other things you cannot do either. You cannot dress the way you want. You cannot go and eat the ma'achalim that you want. You cannot just go and have all the taivas ha'olam. And it's dafka when you become free that you could do all of these things. So why is it that Rabbi Yehuda is expressing it? Why is it that Rabbi Yehuda is saying that this lashon of dror is medayer? It's got connected to a dira. Now this part the Rebbe doesn't say in the Sikha, but I believe it's also explained through the Sikha. Many other Rishonim ask on this Rashi that when you look in other Gemaras when it describes there's a pasuk which speaks about it, Sipor Dror, And what is dror over there? The Gemara, the whole point of the Gemara, what does tzipor dror mean? That it doesn't have a home. It doesn't have a place. Dror means it could go wherever it wants. So they asked, how do you take the same word, and when you speak about the chaydos of an eved, you say that it's a lashon of dira, that it means that it has, that now he can have a home. And when it comes to birds, to animals, etc., we say that what's the chaydos? The chaydos is that it could roam as it wishes, and it doesn't have a home. Anyways, what the Rebbe goes on to explain is a very, very basic nakuda, but something that we have to reflect about is, what is freedom? What is chaydos? You have one type of chaydos that you could roam the world, and you could do what you want, and you could wear what you want, you could eat what you want, you could do whatever you want. Is that chaydos? That's a lush. Yes, that's chaydos, but that's chaydos for a behemoth. It's chaydos for something which belongs in the animal world. By a behemoth, that's what is chaydos. Chaydos means it does what it wants. But by a human being, and by Yid Bifrat, if a person is going to go around and his chaydos is going to express himself, his freedom is going to express himself in the fact that he's going to do whatever he wants, he's not going to feel accomplished, he's not going to feel he's achieving anything, he's not going to feel satisfied, he's eventually going to feel that he's shackled by all his taivas, by everything that he wants. And it's going to lead him to the exact opposite. And therefore, what is Rabbi Yehuda telling us, and what is Rashi being b'shem Rabbi Yehuda, that dror, by a person, dror, true freedom is lashon dira. To make a dira kipshutai, but to make a dira patachtonim, to focus on things which are permanent, to focus on things which are long-term, things which have true permanence, things which will last, and not just get carried away with the inyanim, the aradik inyanim, the temporary things of Olam Hazeh. And the Rebbe explains that that's why Rashi mentions the name of the Tana Rabbi Yehuda in a reference to that Maisa, because by Rabbi Yehuda we see this story, that he was able to pick up the rug and he was able to show under the rug all the coins that you wanted, which means that Rabbi Yehuda had the yichaylis if he wanted to, he could have lived it up, but he lived in abject, complete poverty. And why? Because by Rabbi Yehuda it was a basic hanacha that what is the true chaydos that a person has is the inyanim of dira, the permanent inyanim that he's achieving in the world. And therefore it didn't disturb him that he was completely poor. Ad kedei kach, he had to share a garment together with his wife. But the true chaydos that he had was in this inyan of dira. And that's obviously the true chaydos that we need to have. We live in a world of plenty. And maybe in the sense it's a bit easier. It's kol ha-madanim mitzvim ka'afar, that we don't even care about it anymore, right? So we don't care about the madanim. That's the way it's going to be when Mashiach comes. So if we're going to make a hachana to the coming of Mashiach, then that's the way we should live now as well. That we should take up kol ha-madanim as mitzvim ka'afar, and we shouldn't care for it. And we have to make sure to care on the dira b'tachtonim. L'chaim, l'chaim.
welcome Rabbi Boruch Kaplan. He's not a stranger here. So we'll let him to the Mayanot for his grandson's bris Shabbos. And he's here for another few more hours before he goes to Sydney for Shabbos.
This is the first glass of Solo. I've been here for 3 days. I haven't had a glass of this unique Australian drink. It's very special. It's only here. Rabbi Lesches was talking about Adoni Ka'afar. He's teaching a class here in Melbourne this week, and one of the people in the class, in response to something that really had nothing to do with what was said, but it's all right, said, well, you know, life isn't fair. Life isn't fair. So now when most people say life isn't fair, what do they mean? They mean that relative to them, they don't think they're getting what they deserve in life. Most people don't say life isn't fair, that someone else isn't. Well, they might talk about someone else, but it's usually within the context of something negative. That life isn't fair because some people don't get what they deserve. It's usually a complaint. But when she said it, and it was the second time that I had taught a class, so I had some inkling of whom I was dealing with at that point. So I don't know what, I never thought of this before, because in all fairness, as a teacher, especially in the two places where I happen to teach, which one is with Bali Tshuva, who ask that question a lot. It doesn't seem fair, and 18-year-old SEM girls ask that question even more, that it doesn't seem fair. People like things to be fair. So I never thought of it in the terms that sort of came out immediately, that she's right, life isn't fair. Because the people in that room, and I think I would include the people in this room, we have it so much better than almost anybody in the history of humankind that it's really not fair. That we have it so good. And most people who've lived on the face of the earth don't have anything compared to what we have in Gashmias and Ruchnias. I mean, it's pashut not fair, I agree. That we taka have Madonim Ka'afar in Gashmias and in Ruchnias. People often complain. One of the it's not fairs that you hear a lot and it's coming from a real place. Young Lubavitchers saying it's not fair that they never saw the Rebbe. A very real complaint, so to speak. But we can all complain about not seeing the Rebbe now in a way that we might have in the past, and obviously it's not something we're particularly interested in continuing. But I think last night I was bringing with some of the young women in the community, and the idea came up within the context of the difficulty of bringing up Hasidic children today. And it's true that there's a certain difficulty. But a question was asked. First, it happened to be in a room full of women, so the question was asked relative to women, but then we can ask the same question relative to men. How many women their age who were Hasidim of the Tzemach Tzedek had ever seen the Tzemach Tzedek? So probably almost none, unless you lived in Lubavitch. How many Lubavitch women ever saw the Tzemach Tzedek? It was a different world, different women. They didn't travel to Lubavitch. So if they lived in Lubavitch, maybe they had seen the Rebbe, but there's a good chance, I know you. It's our son. Working at Simi Dudu's Chabad House. So I had to come to Melbourne to see him. So even the men who lived in the time of the Tzemach Tzedek, how many men knew what the Tzemach Tzedek looked like? So Nagid, most of them had gone to Lubavitch once. They've gone to Lubavitch once. I would imagine the Chassidish, someone who's really a pneumistic, a Hasidic guy would remember the Maimer he heard, would remember the Verbrengen he was at, would remember the Rebbe's face. You have to be a pretty pneumistic guy to be able to do that 5 years later, because how often did he get to Lubavitch? And even that guy who had been there, and let's say all the men had made it at some point, which is not the case, but let's say every man had made it at some point. And these are Hasidim that we think of as serious Hasidim, and they were serious Hasidim. It's not that we're just thinking, these were serious Hasidim. Every single person in this room right now, close your eyes, conjure up an image of the Rebbe. Immediately you see the Rebbe's face. But more, conjure up the Rebbe's voice. Close your eyes and hear the Rebbe saying a sikha, hear the Rebbe saying a maimer, hear the Rebbe talking to someone. Every single one of us can conjure up that image immediately. Which is something that, how many Hasidim in the history of Hasidus have that? Now, that doesn't mean that we're not happy with this. But I think the Rebbe teaches us to see the world in a way in which we'll see it in a way that it'll help in our Avodah as opposed to hinder our Avodah. And very often, we are often very creative in figuring out why it is that we can't do what it is that we have to do, whereas if we were just as creative in figuring out how we can do what it is that we have to do, we'd probably get it done. We're very good at explaining why not. I can give you hours and hours of explanations as to why it is I can't be a Chassidish Yid now, but I should theoretically be able to give hours and hours of explanation as to why I can be a Chassidish Yid now. And if I can't, so at least I can talk to someone else and they will be. Even though it obviously should apply to all of us, even the person talking. Halavai. So it's true the world's not fair, but I think that if we think about it objectively, we live with all of the trials and tribulations of life after Gimel Tammuz. And it's definitely not something that any of us imagined would be, and it's certainly not something that any of us are particularly enamored with. But that being said, our job isn't to cry in our mashka. Our job is to put an end to it and realize how we actually have the ability to put an end to what it is that we'd like to put an end to, this golus. And every single one of us has the keiches to do that. Every single one of us has everything we need in Gashmius and in Ruchnius. Last year, Gimel Tammuz, I was sitting in 770, and all of you know, right, Baruch Hashem, from personal experience, 770 on days like that is rather crowded, and if you find a place to sit where you'd like to sit, so then you're not in a situation where you can move from that place, because it's not that someone else will take the place will no longer exist if you move. That space will just not be a space anymore. So, it's not like being, this wide helps, there's no question, but not enough. Unless it happens to be your two best friends that are on either side, they'll always make a little room. But your average guy is very happy that you left. So I happened to walk into 770 early enough, just one of those rare times, and I could find a seat exactly where I usually like to sit. And so of course, if that's the case, and it's early enough in the morning, there's going to be some time before davening. So obviously you want to sit and learn some chassidus, but you have to go armed to where you're sitting. So you take your siddur. And you take a Sefer Maimarim and you sit down. You don't have to worry about Chumash. And there's probably with Rambam, Tanya, Yom, probably someone in the area will have a Devar Malchus. At some point you'll find a Devar Malchus. So that'll be taken care of. You need a Sefer. Fine. So I found the Sefer. I wanted to learn Zeis Chukas from Malukad Hay. Baruch Hashem, I found the Sefer. I sat down and I started learning Zeis Chukas from Malukad Hay. And the Rebbe was talking about the Indian Tefillah Lamesh in a footnote, and I wanted to look up the Maimer, but it took me a little time, not being as well versed in not knowing Baal Peh every Maimer in Milukotim, which is something that really we should, but I don't. So I wanted to find the Maimer that the Rebbe is referring to, Tefillah L'Meisha, but it happens to be Baruch Hashem, the Eibishter was kind to me. It was in the same krach. So there's also in Melukat Hay, it was the Yurav Nisan Maimer from Melukat Hay, Tefillah L'Meshes. So I just turned the pages and found the Maimer. Started learning the Maimer. The Rebbe says something astounding there. Absolutely astounding. The Rebbe asks, what's Pshat in Tefillah L'Meshes? Moshe Rabbeinu, the notion of tefillah generally, when we think of the idea of tefillah, simply, even though of course there's many, many different panim to the notion of tefillah, but the simple pshat in tefillah is to ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu for that which we're lacking. It's the simplest pshat in the notion of tefillah. Right? So, according to Ramban, there's no, the mitzvahs aseh to daven is dafka only be'ez tzara. There's no mitzvahs aseh to daven every day. That's all the Rabbanan. Right? The Rambam says mitzvah aseh min Torah to daven once a day, but the Ramban says no. The mitzvah aseh to daven is only be'ez tzara when you really need something, really need salvation. You're lacking something very serious, and you turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the Rebbe asks, well, how is tefillah relevant to Moshe Rabbeinu? Because Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't lack anything. Moshe Rabbeinu is shleimusa dekuli. So why is he davening? So the Rebbe posits that the obvious, simplest answer is that Moshe is davening that our lacking should be filled. That which we're lacking, the Jewish people, which is what Moshe cares about so much, those lackings should be taken care of by Kadosh Baruch Hu. But the Rebbe also dismisses that answer. Why does the Rebbe dismiss that answer? He says Moshe Rabbeinu is intrinsically connected and essentially connected to every single Jew. And if any Jew lacks anything of absolute importance, that means that Moshe Rabbeinu himself is lacking, because Moshe and the Jew are one. So it can't possibly be that Moshe is davening for our lacking. So what's he davening for? So the Rebbe says an amazing thing. That Moshe Rabbeinu, when he looks at us, and it's the Rebbe talking in the Maimon, because the Rebbe just said this about us in terms of asking the question. When Moshe Rabbeinu looks at us, he sees someone who lacks nothing in terms of that which is necessary to accomplish what they have to accomplish in Elam Hazeh, the reason that their neshama came into their goof in Elam Hazeh. None of us lack anything, that which is necessary to bring about our shlichus in Elam Hazeh. What does Moshe daven? That we should appreciate that. That we should see ourselves like he sees us. Moshe sees us as someone not lacking. But we see ourselves as someone lacking and perhaps unable to do that which it is that ultimately we're sent here to do. We know that when Moshe looks at us, Moshe sees us as someone who can do it, because we're quite overawed by the challenge that Moshe sets before us, and then how much it is that Moshe asks of us. There's no end. And when we're honest with ourselves and we're honest with each other and we sit in for breng, so we're honest about the fact that we find it difficult to live up to it. And what does Moshe daven? Moshe davens that you and I should appreciate the fact that every single thing that we need in order to accomplish that which we are sent here to accomplish, everything is there. We have it. Which of course just makes it harder because it's more challenging. There's no excuse. Okay? We used to call a teretz a sheretz, right? An unclean animal. There's no teretz. There's no excuses. I can't possibly, I can make up all sorts of things, and we're pretty good at that. We tend to be pretty good at it. But ultimately we understand that what it is that we must do, we're able to do. Today, just for bringing with a friend, just trying to figure out, Rebbe says that, Klaus, because he talks about the Lag Beimer is the Matan Torah, Pnimius Torah. Nigla, that's Vav Zayin Siva. Shavuos. Al-Pi Torah Shabal Peh, Zman Matan Torah saying. Lag Beimer is the Kabbalah Satara of Pnimius Satara. Interesting enough, the Rabbi says that in history, first there was Shavuos and then there was Lag Beimer. Quite a serious distance between them, 1,500 years, almost 1,500 years, but between the giving of the Torah in Har Sinai and the revelation and the giving of Pnimius Satara. But in our lives, so Lag Beimer always happens before Shavuos, because without Lag Beimer, without Pnimius Torah, we're not fully armed to accept properly there'll be a Matan Torah, but whether there'll be a Kabbalas Torah as it should be on Shavuos, well, that demands the Pnimius Torah that we receive on Lag BaOmer before Siva. But what's the difference between them? I mean, there's rather obvious differences, but in terms of, we're just forbidding about this today, and I'll throw it out there and see if it resonates from one Farbrengen to another Farbrengen. Nigla generally, simply talks about our obligation. What we're obligated to do, what we're obligated not to do. That's what Nigla discusses, so we have to know what those obligations are. Pnimius Torah, especially the Pnimius Torah of our generation, yeah, of course, the obligations never disappear. I mean, bottom line, we're obligated. Kabbalah Soul, we're obligated, we're committed and obligated to do that which the Eibishter wants, and that's Zeh Ma Sheyesh, that's what there is. But so much of what the Rebbe teaches us is not so much the obligation of it all, but the opportunity. Torah and mitzvahs is an opportunity to touch Elokus. Yes, of course you're obligated to do it, that's true. But the pnimius of it all is that we have this unbelievable opportunity to touch Elokus in everything we do. We can relate to it solely in a very, very chitzonistic way as an obligation, and then it might be something that's easier, something that's more difficult, and then I'll somehow try to fit it into my life and see if I can't organize my life in such a way that the obligations are taken care of. Because after all, there's obligations. We have to make sure we take care of these obligations. I have to organize my life in order to make sure that these obligations that are part of my life are taken care of. But the Rebbe, Pnimius is so much more. Pnimius is about this incredible opportunity that every single one of us has to touch Elokus in our life, to actually be connected to what's real in our life. And then it's not so much a sacrifice to do that which I'm obligated to do. It's this incredible, hopefully an incredible excitement to take advantage of the opportunity that Torah and mitzvahs present. And that's so much how Chassidus describes Torah and mitzvahs. I mean, Chassidus doesn't always talk about Torah and mitzvahs. Chassidus spends a great deal of time talking about a Kodesh Boruch Hu Neto. Not so much, this mitzvah, that mitzvah, the meaning of it. That's there, but there's just so many maimarim of the Torah and mitzvahs have nothing to do with the maimar. It's about levels of Elokus far beyond the relationship with this world. But that's also just part of the opportunity. You learn the 5th parak of Tanya and Talmud Torah. What does Talmud Torah become? It's an obligation. I don't know. Someone just explained to you that you can experience a unity with the Kodesh Boruch Hu beyond any unity imaginable in Gashmis. Oh my gosh, I'm obligated to do that? I'm allowed to do that? I'm able to do that? That's really something that can be part of my life? That's astounding. Especially when we experience our own limitation as powerfully as we do, and yet we can transcend that in such a way. Wow! And then a yid's excited. Obligation? Yay! We have to. It never leaves the realm of obligation. There's an obligation. Azoygate. That's the way it is. We are obligated to act a certain way and to not act other ways and do certain things at certain times. We're inspired. We're not inspired. It's not the question. But Pnimius Torah, Lag BaOmer, opens us up to the bonfire, the fire of it all, the warmth of it all, the air of it all, the Elokus of it all. It's so different. And it's so hard for us to imagine anybody who relates to Yiddishkeit in any other way, but you hear stories. Right? I mean, where I live, you don't hear stories. You just see it at every Marav. It looks so painful. People look in pain. Daven Ishman Esra, push it in pain. Marav is the best. Shachris, people are half asleep. Mincha, I don't know where they're holding. Marav, phew. Marav, I don't know. Marav is an obligation and not an opportunity. Looks pretty painful. Shmon Esrei looks painful. Avedis Torah is all about opening up the opportunity of Torah, the opportunity to connect to the Eibishter, this incredible opportunity. I mean, what do Chassidim know? We say it, and when we say it, we're not saying it because we don't think it's true. We're saying it because we know it's true. We don't know exactly how it would work. And we know the Rebbe said to us what the Rebbe said to us relative to I've done what I can do. But when the Rebbe said I've done what I can do, the Rebbe didn't say I've done all I can do to bring Mashiach. The Rebbe didn't say that. The Rebbe said I've done everything I can do to arouse in you a desire to bring Mashiach. Could the Rebbe bring Mashiach alone? I would imagine so. But, I mean, I don't know exactly how these things work, but I would imagine the Rebbe can do that. And yet the Rebbe is kind enough to you and I to allow us the opportunity to be part of this incredible enterprise called Bias Mashiach, called fixing the world, Dir B'Tachtenim. The Eibishter B'Chalal, the Eibishter could have created a world, you want to Dir B'Tachtenim, so create a Dir B'Tachtenim. What's else from there? What do you want from me? Why are you bothering me with all of this, Hell and Esther and Aveda? Just create a Dir B'Tachtenim, I understand. The Eibishter couldn't create a Dir B'Tachtenim? He did. It was called Gan Eden. Lasted for a few hours. It was a Dir B'Tachtenim. It was there. I mean, that's why it was there, that we should know there's such a thing. It's real. It was there as part of the creation of the world. The destruction of Gan Eden was part of the creation of the world, not part of the history of the world. People get mixed up, think, there was a Gan Eden, and then the world was, then the Eibishter, so to speak, stopped creating, and then we blew it. No. The destruction of Gan Eden is part of the creation of the world. It happened on the 6th day of creation. I mean, the Eibishter created it and destroyed it. And that's all part of creating the world that he wanted, which is the one that showed up after all that. This one, the one we're in. Cairns, and Townsville, and Mackay, and Port Douglas. Yeah, you thought I was just Sydney and Melbourne. Actually, you guys just go Melbourne. It's not even and in Sydney, it's just Sydney. You don't even have the same sports. No. Okay. But the Eibishter wanted this world. He wanted what we've got, and he wanted us to turn that world into a Dir B'Tachtenim. He knows how to make a Dir B'Tachtenim. He knows how to do it, but he's not interested in him doing it. He wants us to do it. Okay. So on one hand, we could see this as an obligation. On the other hand, we could see this as an incredible opportunity to be involved in something so incredible. But in order to do that, I have to get out of myself a little. If I'm stuck in myself, I'll just relate to it as an obligation that's taking me away from what I really want to do relative to myself. Whatever that may be. Something reasonable or something completely unreasonable. But if I can move a little bit out of myself, which is Lag B'Omer. Lag B'Omer, the Rebbe explains, is Hoid Shebahid. What's Hoid Shebahid? Hoid Shebahid is the lowest level of Aveda. The Rebbe explains there's in the 7 midas, so there's 5 levels of the midah itself, the actual binyan of the midas. What are Yesod and Malchus? Yesod and Malchus are already the connection to something as a result of the fact that there is such a midah. There's a binyan of the midah itself. And Malchus is Machshava Dibur and Maisa relative to the connection as a result of the Midah. So the Midah itself, the Midahs themselves, the 5 levels of Midah are Chesed, Gvur, Tiferes, Netzach, Chayil. Yesod is already the beginning of the expression of the Midah to the extent that I'm connected to something, and Malchus is the external expression of that connection by virtue of the Machshava Dibur and Maisa. So the end of the midah itself is Hoid. So what's Hoid Shebahoid? The lowest level of the midah itself. And what's that? So that brings the mashal of the difference between a Chacham Gadol and a Chacham Katan, as opposed to the Chacham Gadol and an Ish Pashut. The Chacham Gadol speaks and the Chacham Katan hears, and even though the Chacham Katan doesn't understand everything the Chacham Gadol says, he's still mispile from what he says, and he's made the experiences a certain level of hoda'av, of acknowledgement of the greatness of the Chacham, but mitzad, his own seichel. What's Hoid Shebahoid? The Ish Pashut. The Ish Pashut hears the Chacham Gadol speak. He doesn't have any intellectual understanding of the greatness of the Chacham in the context of intellect. He doesn't appreciate how this idea is greater than any other idea. He's not in the world of ideas. But he just has in his neshama the koyach to acknowledge the greatness of this chacham and to be bottled to that chacham. And that's how it should behave. The Rabbi says that's meidim d'Rabbanan. Meidim enachnu lach, al shan meidim lach. Which, just to be personal, it's something that I appreciate saying 3 times on Shabbos. I haven't said it for months. Because when you daven from the Yom, you miss saying meidim d'Rabbanan every day. You don't say it. It's a beautiful davening. You never get to say meidim d'Rabbanan on Shabbos. You get to say it 3 times. That's it. Shachris, Mincha, Shachris, Musaf, Mincha. You're saying a regular meidim. While everybody's saying this beautiful meidim d'Rabbanan. It's beautiful. Don't get to say it. They hear yourself croaking away. Oh man! But it's I realized the first shot. I said, wait a minute. I said meidim d'Rabbanan for a week. Right? It's such a beautiful davening. Never appreciated it as much before. Now I do. No, say that. So what's meidim d'Rabbanim? Heitzebay. Meidim d'Rabbanim. Meidim anachnu lach al she'anu meidim lach. Simply because we're meidim. Meida ani. The beginning of all of Veda is Heida. Meida ani. Heidu levaya. Right? We start davening with Heida. We start the day with Meida. Meida before ani. There's no ani yet. There's a Meida before there's an ani. Not ani modeh. No, there's no ani. There's a Meida first. Then there's an ani. Room for a ni if there's a Meida first. Then the ani is the ani in the right place. That's the beginning of everything. Is to realize the koyach in our neshama to move ourselves aside and be able to say that there's something bigger than me. It's more important than me. And if I really chap it, I figure out that my life isn't about me. It's about something bigger than me, which is hard to do because that thing called me makes so much noise every day in my life. My goodness gracious, he's so noisy. Okay, beside him, I feel very at home with him. He's like, he doesn't feel like a stranger. Okay, somehow that guy has to figure out that he has to move over and realize, wait, hold on, I know you're there, and the Eibster created you, so you know life is not about you. Life is about something much bigger than you. Life is about the Abdachteinim, life is about Bias Mashiach, life is about the Eibster, life is about being a chassid of the Rebbe. That's what life is about. It's not about you and even your desire to do any of those things. It's not about that. It's about those things happening. And that's Lag Baimer. Lag Baimer is Heichi Beheid, and the Rebbe explains that the koyach of the Rashbi was to connect the highest level with the lowest level. That the Rashbi revealed the deepest Torah ever revealed was revealed in Lag Baimer after the day of Heichi Beheid, which is the lowest level in Aveda. Lower than that, there's no Aveda. Mishalayim Meidim. Somebody doesn't Mishalei Kareya b'Meidim. Dave Shishidrasi Nachash. There's no Aveda if there's no Meidim. And yet the Rashbi connected the highest level of Torah with the lowest level of Aveda. That's the Rashbi. A friend of mine told me today something very, very interesting. Just think about the Rashbi. The Rashbi on one hand was this incredible Mekubal, on the other hand he's a credible halachist who's quoted in Mishnayos. A revolutionary fighting the Romans tooth and nail, right? A person who could perform incredible miracles, filling up valleys with coins, and yet at the same time he's hiding in a cave, making a tree grow in the cave so that he has food. He's hiding in a cave from the Romans. It's an incredible dichotomy in this life, like a political revolutionary unwilling to accept the political reality of the time and fighting it tooth and nail, these Roman heathens. And at the same time, the halachic authority, the Google, everything. Connecting everything together at once. That's the koyach the Rashbi gives. Last night, Rabbi Groner quoted an amazing sikh of the Frierdiker Rebbe that all of us are given the koyachs of all of the Rebbeim. Tafshin Yud Aleph, page 220, right? Right, but page 220.
214.
Oh, so wait, what's it? The Alter Rebbe is page 220? I thought one of them was page 220. 214?
Farbrengen starts on page 212.
Okay.
Farbrengen from Beis Nissen Tafshin Gimel.
It's printed in Tafshin Yud Aleph. L'chaim, l'chaim. We should all do what we have to do, and we should all take advantage of all these incredible opportunities that we have. Life in Eilam Hazeh. What's life in Eilam Hazeh? What? I just want to ask one more question. I'm sorry for being annoying. I've been with 13-year-olds and women so far today, so this is like a pleasure to sit with a bunch of men and I can actually drink l'chaims and ramble. So, what mimer did the Rebbe say more than any other mimer? Very simple question. Basi Lagani, right? No question. I mean, it's not even close. Probably 40 plus mimer in Basi Lagani. Simple shot in Basi Lagani. What's the world? It's a gun. It's a gun. Everybody thinks the world is this terrible. There's sikhs and there's my marim. I'm going back there to Rabbi Lesches and I were talking about this. I'm missing Bechukai side this year, right? Because I heard Emor twice, so I was very good at the Haftarah the second time. So I really had it down the second time. There's no problem. When do you get to say the same Haftarah 2 weeks running? So that was good. But so I'll hear Bahar this week. I'm saying. We were talking why, because I'm saying the chittas of Bechukai side. I said the chittas of Bahar, so I'm just saying the chittas because so I won't. And next week is B'midbar. So in B'midbar, there's all sorts of sikhs and Maimarim. It said the world's a midbar and the Nachash and the that's true. Of course, that's true. There's that aspect of it all. But bottom line, how does the Rebbe talk about the world more than in any other way? It's a gam. It's this beautiful place full of Elokus, and we just have to open up our eyes and see it and live it, and it's all there. I'm saying there's the desert of it, that's true. But sometimes we're so into the desert of it, we forget, it's a gan. Basi Lagani, a choisi, Kala, we're his sister, we're his bride. He loves us, he wants to be with us. L'chaim, l'chaim. 5% crushed lemons. Chaim, Chaim.
Amen, Bracha.
719, yeah, you're right, 719.
So if I try out,
Actually, tomorrow, 719.
20. Figure out. I'll do it. I once heard a story. It's a kid's story, but it's good for adults. Once a camel. A camel who hanging out with his mother, sort of unsure of a lot of his own existence. So he asked his mother, he said, I don't understand. I've got this lump, this hump on my back. What's the hump about? What's this hump all about? So the mother said, what do you mean? We live in the desert. We travel long distances. We need to store water, so we store it in the hump. And then we don't die of dehydration. So yeah. Oh. Okay. Fine. So then he goes away and does whatever camels do, and then he comes back. His mom asks another question. Yeah. Look at my feet. I've got these enormous feet. They're huge. Yours also. They're just huge. I got skinny legs, but these enormous feet. What do I have such big feet for? It's like embarrassing. He says, no, but you walk in the sand. You have to have big, wide feet so you don't sink in the sand. You have to be able to not sink. You're heavy. You're big, so you don't sink. You have these big, wide feet. Oh, yeah, that's why. Okay. Thanks. Walks away. Comes back. Mom, can I ask another question? Yeah. I can barely see through these eyelashes of mine. They're so thick that I can't see through them. They're very, very thick. Why do I need such thick eyelashes? I can't see a thing. She says, the desert, the wind kicks up the sand that gets in your eyes. This protects your eyes from all of the sand that would get in your eyes and really hurt you. This way you're protected. She said, wow, really? That's cool, Mom, thanks. Disappears, comes back. 5 minutes later, says, Mom, I got one more question. Why are we in the Bronx Zoo? I once heard someone tell it at a Verbrenger. He said, why? But Yid, we have everything necessary to do what it is that we're supposed to do in Elam. And very often we can get sidetracked and spend our time doing things that all of those things that we have are irrelevant. That you don't have to be a Yid to do those things. I mean, a Goy can also do it, even though he doesn't have all those special things that we have in order to do what it is that we have to do as Yidden. We have to bring Mashiach, we have to illuminate the world, we have to change reality. Okay, so it might be that a person decides, no, my job is to make a lot of money in the Bursa. So you don't need an Nefesh Elokis to make a lot of money in the Bursa. You don't need all those things that Yidden have to make a lot of money in the Bursa. You just need to go and make a lot of money in the Bursa, and Jews make. What difference does it make? What do you need all those things that we have for? To do those things that we were sent to Elam Hazet to do, specifically those things. And we have to be so careful that we don't put ourselves in the zoo, in a place where those things aren't really necessary in order to accomplish what might be accomplished in that place. Because where we want to be, now Taka, so the world's a desert. If we're a camel, so the world has to be a desert. But the whatever it is that we have to accomplish, so we've got these incredible keiches to do it, but we have to make sure that we're in a place and doing those things where those keiches are necessary and can ultimately express themselves properly. So all sorts of things in Elam Hazeh where being a Yid is irrelevant for a Yid. Why? Well, because I'm involved in stuff that, what difference does it make? It's not something Jewish, it's not something necessary, it's not something that's part of the reason we're here, so then obviously those things that the Eibishter gave us in order to accomplish what it is we're supposed to accomplish are not particularly important or necessary in this realm. We have to make sure that we might have to deal with that realm now and then, but even when we deal with that part of life, we have to make sure that we're dealing with it in such a way that someone is allowing for their nefesh elokis to be expressed in that. In other words, how they treat the people around them and how they use their time there and how they make sure that certain things are, the way they talk to their neighbor. And the avodah that we can do is everywhere. My wife once said doctors were paid so poorly in Eretz Yisrael that they could afford to put a doctor on the intensive care ambulance. They can't anymore. Now they put senior paramedics. But in those days, a doctor used to man the intensive care ambulance. So the people got better care because the doctors weren't paid. So, you know, if Chas v'Shalom, a person had a heart attack at home, a doctor would show up with the ambulance, not paramedics. So she did this for a number of years. And I must say, I can toot her horn, that the reason she did it was because she wanted to make sure she could do something that she could be at home with her children during the day, so she used to do this at night. It was a job that could be done at night. And so I don't exactly know when she slept. I'm not sure. I was away during the day, but she would work on the ambulance at night, and then she would be home for the kids in the day, during the day. But she once was working on the ambulance, and there were a bunch of volunteers from Tel Aviv, students who were becoming paramedics, who came from Tel Aviv to work in Yerushalayim, just to see the difference between Tel Aviv and Yerushalayim, different population, different work. One thing that they don't have in Tel Aviv is they certainly don't go into the alleyways of the old city with army accompaniment to take care of some Arab who had a heart attack in the middle of the old city. That they don't do in Tel Aviv. So for the guys in Tel Aviv, that was interesting to have army escort into enemy territory in order to save someone. If we have to go in here with the army, why don't we just so don't shoot at us and we'll come. You want to shoot at us, we won't come. But anyway. That isn't the way it works. Jews don't work that way. So they would get army protection to go into a dangerous place to go help some guy who was having a heart attack. So that's the way it goes. So they all found this very interesting. At one point they were having a conversation, and these kids from Tel Aviv, and they really are different than kids from Yerushalayim. So and they were asking, what do you want most in life? They're asking each other. Fine. So then they turned to Dr. Ricky. They say, Dr. Ricky. And they all said, Tel Aviv said, we know what you want. So she said, what do I want? I want a Mashiach. Oh. So then she asked, why? Lama. So they said, it's really interesting. These kids from Tel Aviv said, Ze kolel hakol. That includes everything. All the things that we wanted. So if we got what you wanted, so Mustama, the things that we wanted would also be like in there. If they wanted absolute shtus, it wouldn't be. But they wanted reasonable things, a healthy family, a nice marriage, whatever it is they asked. Okay, so that'll be part of it. So it's so interesting. They immediately understood that this Lubavitch doctor lady, what does she want? Well, she wants Mashiach, because in Eretz Yisrael, Mashiach, Lubavitch, Rabbi, those three things go together like, soup and sandwich, love and marriage. It used to go together, but anyway, love and marriage, horse and carriage, so Lubavitch and Mashiach go together in Israel, Baruch Hashem. It's whether or not it was Ba'ef and Miskabel when all those posters with the Rebbe's picture and Mashiach written under, whether it was Ba'ef and Miskabel when they went up 20 years ago, I don't know. Maybe yes, maybe no. But it's Ba'ef and Miskabel now, because everybody in Eretz Yisrael just connects the two without any question. The only people who don't are the Frumma, but everybody else in Eretz Yisrael, those two things are synonymous. Lubavitch and Rebbe, Lubavitch and Mashiach, it's all the same. Right? It's just reality. Right? So... But so as soon as they saw Lubavitcher, what did they realize? Well, she wants Mashiach. Okay. So when we're out there in the mundane world, we can get our message across. She didn't have to get the message across because it was written on all the signposts on the highways. But we can have an effect out there. You guys know better than me. Many of you are probably out there. I sit in this sheltered little thing called the Beis Medrash for Balei Tshuva in Yerushalayim. It's a little bubble. Melbourne also is a little bubble. Everybody in the world lives in a bubble, but people have different jobs in their bubble. Okay. But we have to make sure that we don't put ourselves in the Bronx Zoo, and that we don't use all these keiches that the Eibush gave. We can do it in Yiddishkeit. We can use all the keifas the Eibishter gave us in order to serve him, but serve him in such a way that's not exactly the way that he wants to be served. So where the Chassidus talks about the fact that the Rabbi talks about it clearly in Lesches Mishakela, that a person can stop themselves from reaching a state of Ava and Yira by virtue of the fact that they have too many of their own Ritzenis, and the Rebbe says, Leimi by Ritzenis of the Yetzer Hara, but Leimi by Ritzenis of the Nefesh HaBahamis, Va'afilu Ritzenis of the Nefesh Elokis, even the desires of the Nefesh Elokis. What do you mean? How can my desires of Nefesh Elokis keep me from coming to a state of love and fear? Well, if my spiritual agenda is not the Eibishter's, so then it's not. It's spirituality, and it's Yiddishkeit, and what I want from Yiddishkeit. Okay, and it means and I'm learning, and I'm davening, I'm doing all, but it's my agenda. So then it's not the Eibishter. Doesn't mean it's not good stuff. It's wonderful. It's incredible. It's beautiful. But it's not. It's not Ava. It's not Yira. It's Adarabah. Keep someone in a kader. Keep someone as a person who's not giving birth to Ava and Yira. Because we have our own spiritual agenda. Our own spiritual agenda can be the Bronx Zoo instead of where we're supposed to be. The Rebbe made it very, very clear to us what our spiritual agenda is supposed to be. His spiritual agenda. What's his spiritual agenda? Supposed to bring Mashiach. However we think that's supposed to be. I mean, no one has a monopoly on the way to do it. You disagree with the way some people do it, fine, no problem. Instead of fetching about it, just do it another way. Get it together and do it some other way. You don't like the way this person does it. So what? Okay, no one asked you. Go do it some other way. Do it the way you think it should be done, but do it. Every single one of us. Just figure out how to make it happen. And we will. And we'll bring Yerushalayim together. I guess the shul's going to come, right? The whole shul's going to come. So at some point there'll be a Fabring, and does the whole complex come? Like, how does it work? The shul, the whole place? Does the basketball court come? Come on, Rabbi Lesches, you're a rabbi here. Does the basketball court? I don't know.
Invested in it.
I don't know. There's no plaque on the backboard, so I don't know whether that counts. And if it doesn't have a plaque on it with a name, it doesn't say like the so-and-so backboard, so it might not count. I'm not sure. But the whole process, I assume the whole come and
when there was a car park for people to come to shul, they had the Ellis. I'm not joking. I'm being facetious.
So it'll be good. The whole place. You guys are going to need there's going to be a big shetach of all these incredible Mazdays from Melbourne. A couple of years ago, 2 years ago when we came for Pesach. So I flew here first, but I came with our two youngest. And we flew through Melbourne because we found a cheap flight through Melbourne. But I wanted to spend some time here, and rather than put them on a flight up to Cairns immediately after we landed, I wanted them to spend a day and a half. They landed at 5 in the afternoon. They spent the next day here, and then the morning after that, they went up to Cairns to help prepare for Shabbos Pesach up there. But I really wanted them to see Melbourne. I wanted them to see. There's very few places in the world where you see the keiches of the Rebbe ba'ofen muchashi in such a concrete way. You just walk up and down. Empress. So there are amazing things on both sides. So we were staying on Empress in the Rubens house, and I explained to them how to get across the street to the mikveh, and of course they were going to daven in the latest minyan, which is 9:15 at the 770 at the Kimberley. So, and that was pretty good in all fairness. We landed at 5 o'clock after traveling, 42 days to get here. So they did well. They got up. They went to mikveh, then they went to minyan, and I taught a class in Americas, I think at 10, and so I went to an earlier minyan, and then I met them back at the Rubens. I said, "No, how was it?" So what did they say? It's so interesting. Two 18-year-olds who grew up in Har Nof. Har Nof is an extremely Hasidically challenged neighborhood in Yerushalayim, and they live in Yerushalayim. So now Yerushalayim, there's nowhere where there's blocks and blocks of Lubavitch Mesas in Yerushalayim. There's Torah Semis. And it goes down the hill a little bit, but that's that. And it's like a Baros here and a Chabad Shul here, but there's nowhere where there's all this stuff together. The girls' school is 15 blocks away. So what did they say? It was such a riot. They came. I said, "No, how was it?" This place is like Crown Heights. You walk down the street, it's all Lubavitcher Meisdes, like everywhere you go. I said, okay, it's 2 blocks like that. Crown Heights is 10 blocks, but or 15 by 15, etc. But they're right. You walk down a street and experience something that very few people anywhere else in the world can experience, that every Meised you see, girls' school, kindergarten, yeshiva, school, it's all the Rebbe's Meisdes. Like, that's just, you guys take this for granted. It's unbelievable. They said it's like Grand Heights. They walk down the street, they take a right turn, there's a 770 over there, right? So they davened over there, they came back, what do they see? They see that, and they hadn't gone down the other end. If they'd gone down the other end towards Balaclava, away from Ingram, so they would see more, right? So they saw a little bit of that on their way to the mikveh. They were blown away. So it worked. Their day in Melbourne was
I just
good.
came from around the corner from a place called Agdas. There are Polishes in Australia that speak pure English. Yeah,
No, I know there are other
fell
people
flat.
in Melbourne. I got that, but it's this little tiny place over here. There's other people, Baruch Hashem. They could come here because there was Lubavitchers here, and they could make it here. There'd be Yiddishkeit here because the Lubavitchers came first. But Baruch Hashem, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. Incredible. Last night we bring.
The Friedrich Rebbe helped start up Hadassah also.
Yeah.
But you do the Yeah. Going back to
When the first Shluchim came here.
No, before that.
Before that.
Before
a few years before that. There was a family that came, you won't mention the name of that family that had an opportunity to come here. It was in the mid-40s. And the father had a shaykhus to the Rebbe. He had met him already in Wien before. And he asked for a grateful basic from Bengalish in Williamsburg. Australia. He said, I will fragen about the Lubavitcher Rebbe. So he went to the Friedrich Rebbe. The Friedrich Rebbe said, "Was machen Yiddishkeit? That's the machen Yiddishkeit." They gave him brachas, and they were to look after him. Well, they were one of the nucleus families of Hadassah Israel. There's letters of Tafshin Beis from the Friedrich Rebbe to the Mujitzer Rebbe had an aide here living there, and then to another Yid. And the Friedrich Rebbe was saying, "Manish lo b'machanechem, v'inin shel limud atenu b'rabim u'chilek ha'ilachim." Friedrich Rebbe was worried about them Tafshin Beis.
They had that in school?
They didn't have a shul, they didn't have a kehillah, it's still the forerunner. Before they had a shul called Beis Ephraim. That kehillah
And then went to the Kaplan from there.
I'm assuming it's rude to ask. Shkoyach.